everybody, welcome to an episode of Tap In with TT. My special guest today is our very own Lisa Evers from Street Soldiers, who is in Manhattan right now covering the Diddy trial. Lisa, I have a ton of questions for you today with regards to day 2 of what's happening in court with Diddy. First of all, tell me his overall demeanor inside the courtroom.
All right, well, first of all, TT, let me tell you where I'm at. Right across the street here, you guys can see it's 500 Pearl Street. It's the federal court. Inside that court on the 26th floor courtroom, this is where everything is unfolding in this federal sex trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs. His demeanor, earlier before this week, he would be very kind of as social as you can be when you're a detainee and you're under federal arrest there. In the courtroom, he would shake hands with his defense. He would look at people that he knew in the crowd, in the audience. He would give people a heart sign. He would do things like that, make eye contact with them. His demeanor now is extremely serious, as it should be, because if he loses this thing, he's looking at the rest of his life, the possibility of the rest of his life behind bars. But today, what it was Cassie was on the stand, and he's basically, the way the court is situated, she's on the witness stand like you see in different court TV shows and things. And then he's seated at the table with the defense team, and basically kind of looking almost in a direct line of sight with her. Now the media, the audience, and the family and other people that are there, spectators, we're behind the defense table, so we only see him really from the back. But at one point, we could see his head going a little bit like shaking his head just a little bit, like kind of like either this is terrible or it's not true. I mean, you can't interpret.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is he shaking his head in terms of like these allegations are false, or he's embarrassed that this level of exposure is out to the public now? Because what we've learned from the transcripts, and I have them right here, Cassie described intimate freak-off scenes where male prostitutes were urinating in her mouth because that was a request of Diddy, and obviously, that was something that a lot of folks grabbed in the media that now has gone viral. She also discussed intimate things that would happen once the male prostitute.
Let me just jump in here for a second. But we should really let people know, because there was a lot of really very graphic and very disturbing things that came out in court and that are in the transcript. And we just, I don't want to say trigger warning, but we really need to let people know, especially women, that this could be very upsetting to them when they hear this. But his demeanor, we can't interpret what his demeanor was, but it had to be tough for him, because yesterday his three daughters are there in court, while the male sex worker was testifying about what Diddy was doing to himself while he was watching this male sex worker have sex with his girlfriend Cassie. The three girls, it got too much for them, and they ended up leaving the courtroom. They were there in court today with him, as were the boys. But it's got to be tough for everybody, but especially Cassie, because she's up there on the stand. She's got to be like 8 or 8.5 months pregnant. She's sitting up there. She's talking about how she met him when she was 19. Stars in her eyes, thinking she's going to have this amazing recording career and be a huge successful artist. And then instead, 2 years later, turns into this personal relationship, and then very quickly, all of her work on her music ends up being replaced by everything in setting up these freak-offs, participating in these freak-offs.
She said that the freak-offs took up so much of their time that she could no longer work on the music part of this, right? So I want to just say, everybody that is just tapping in, Lisa Evers is outside the courtroom where the case is now being tried. And if you hear noises in the background, it's because she is live at that courtroom. So you'll hear sound.
On the street. I'm outside, literally.
Yeah, literally outside covering the case. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically is, I see that Diddy obviously looks so different than what he has normally looked like outside of being Puff Daddy, right? He's full of gray hair. He doesn't have all his flashy jewelry and all the things that we are used to seeing him when he's on stage. Do you think that's done purposely, or he's just not allowed to have those things at all in the jail?
Well, he's not. He's not allowed. He was allowed. He was given a special. He was given special permission by the judge before the testimony and everything. Before jury selection started last week, that he could have 5 outfits for court. Basically, crew neck sweater, collared shirt, like what they call business casual, and some trousers. And of course, because he's a federal inmate, he can't have a belt. So there's no belt for the pants. We saw them kind of sliding down. He's lost a lot of weight since this whole thing started, and he was arrested last September. And then he also cannot have any shoes or sneakers with laces, so we can't really see what's on his feet in the courtroom. But he was allowed to have shoes. So the judge said you can have 5 pairs of this. So we've seen navy blue last week. We saw black. We saw gray. We saw tan. We're seeing lighter colors. He has 5 sets of clothes that he can wear for the 5 days of court every week. No jewelry. There's no diamond studs. There's absolutely nothing of that, because he's an inmate at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, and is not allowed to wear that. But they allowed him to have regular clothes for the court appearance. And the judge reminding people, he reminded the jury multiple times. He reminded the courtroom. He said, despite everything that everybody's hearing, Mr. Combs is innocent in this court until he is proven guilty by the jury, period, end of story. And I think that's something, Titi, we need to really keep in mind, because especially, a lot of people have already convicted him, and but he's entitled to a trial just like everybody else. And we're going to see what kind of evidence there is, to support these charges.
Yeah, a lot of folks on the internet are talking about this case already. It's the biggest thing in culture right now. And, some folks, being that the testimonies with the male prostitute and now Cassie, folks are saying, yes, he's guilty of domestic violence, but where's the evidence that is him breaking the law in terms of sex trafficking, racketeering, and things of that nature? And I guess this is some of the things that the defense has raised, right? He may be an abuser, he may be a bad person, and he may live this swinger lifestyle. And so they're also making these claims that doesn't mean that he has broken any laws, right?
But but the case, and this is, and what you're pointing out is exactly what the defense is saying. They're saying you may not like his kinky lifestyle, you may not like his sexual proclivities, his sexual practices, you may not like the kind of person he is, and all of this, but he's not guilty of trafficking. However, we're already starting to see how the prosecution is crafting this. Trafficking, according to the legal experts that I've talked to as we've been covering this case for Hot 97, Ron Street Soldiers, every day for Fox 5. So please follow me, Lisa Evers on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I'm out here every day. We're doing reports on this. And the fact of the matter is, to have a RICO case and racketeering, you have to show force and coercion. We think of sex trafficking as like young women in the back of a van being smuggled across a border somewhere. But the fact is, if someone is forced into it, and they carefully crafted that today, while a lot of people are focusing on these sensational and really disturbing details of these freak-offs, Cassie, the prosecutor, is having Cassie testify about these things, about the force that was used against her. She said she lived in constant fear of Diddy because of these beatings that she sustained. He would drag her by her hair, as we saw in that horrific video in the LA hotel hallway, which, by the way, has been shown in court yesterday and today. She was subjected to physical beatings, where he would hit her in the head. She was kicked in the stomach. She was stomped on her head. All of these types of things that she's describing in a very matter-of-fact tone, just explaining to people she was in constant fear. And then the other thing too, Titi, that came out today, the thing that kept resonating with me is here's this woman. She's, I think, 38 now. She's her pretty much those years, like your years in your 20s or the years in the early 30s. It's like these are like the most exciting times for a lot of women in terms of whatever their dream is and pursuing their dream, and where they either make headway towards it or they get sidelined on it, or they get off track. But anyway, for her, it was this thing of, it was so incredibly sad to hear her talk about this, and that she had the hopes of the music career. And then instead, she ends up spending all of her time organizing these freak offs, hiring these male sex workers under the pseudonym of Jackie Starr, basically booking men to have sex with her while he watched, and then using all these bottles of baby oil. There were about 10 large bottles of baby oil used in every freak off, she said. There were drugs used, everything from Molly, from ecstasy, MDMA to mushrooms to cocaine to all of these types of things. And it just was very, very sad. She was able to convey this in a dignified way, but in a very calm way. But you could feel the sadness in her, even with everything that she's done to try to rebuild this new life with her husband, Alex Fine.
I want
She's had
to,
already.
yeah, I want to talk about that. But I just want to remind people, if you're watching or you're listening on the radio, Lisa Evers is live outside the courtroom where the trial is taking place. So that's why you hear cars. That's why you hear horns. She is live on assignment covering the Diddy case inside the courtroom. There are no cameras allowed in the courtroom. So
Exactly.
therefore,
Exactly.
that's why we can't get her inside the courtroom. The judge has banned the cameras. Now, I want to talk about the judge's ruling on whether or not the media will be able to see the sex tapes. But before I get to that, I want to remind people during this time that Cassie met Diddy, she was only 19 years old and he was significantly much older than her. So I want 17 years older than her. So I want people to put things in perspective. And at that time, Diddy was at the height of who he was. And he was someone who can make a call at any given moment to make things happen, right? So, and I say that to say, because I see a lot of people on the internet saying, well, and even in the transcript, she did agree. She said that she agreed to do these things, but then she feared, she was nervous, she was anxious, she didn't know what to really expect. And then once she got in it, she didn't know how, she couldn't say no. She would feared what would come with saying no. So just that to put things in perspective so people can understand the age difference between the two as we discuss this case, right?
Well, right. And I think also, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think the point you're making is so important. Is so important. And I think the other thing is that she testified to how he slowly. So remember, she's like 19, 20, 21. It's when you don't have your, a credit. You maybe have a credit card. You don't have a great credit rating. You're doing whatever you can to try to have a place to live and stay and get your career going. He took control of every aspect of her life, from where she lived, from her access to money, which was through two of the people that worked for him, in his business. Controlled how she looked, controlled what she wore, controlled her movements, her very movements over her
And
own
took her
body.
technology, like her phone and her laptop, whenever he would put her on punishment, things of that nature, isolating her from friends and families. And this was not something that she said happened right away. It slowly happened. From reading the transcript, there was one part that she said she wanted to do it because she loved him. And she thought that it was interesting that she thought she wasn't allowed to have other men in her life, but he had other girlfriends, he had other women. And so I found that very interesting. And also what I wanted to ask you was the judge, the defense team asked the judge to not allow her now husband, Alex Fine, inside the courtroom because they would potentially call him to the witness stand. But the judge decided to allow him inside the courtroom until there was a discussion around an alleged sex assault that took place, right? So can you break that down as to why, that had happened?
Well, the judge allowed. Did not want him. They did not want him in the courtroom. Period. Because I think they wanted. Again, it's controlling the narrative. They could have more control over her, even like a head game type of thing, without her husband Alex Fine being there. But he was allowed to. The judge allowed him to be in the courtroom today. He'll be allowed to be in the courtroom tomorrow. And the defense is basically they're trying to do anything that they can because the evidence that this prosecutor is pulling out in terms of hitting these key points that you need for the federal sex trafficking RICO case, she's hitting everything kind of like right on, hitting the nail right on the head there. And so Cassie, I think the thing is, so Cassie was asked point blank by the prosecutor, why didn't you leave? if you were disgusted by these freak offs and things like that. She said, because I was afraid what would happen. She goes, everything was controlled. And, he had the bodyguards. The bodyguards would be sent to find her if she tried to disappear somewhere. We know about that. There was testimony about that. And then there was testimony about the increasing, degrading things that she was asked to do during these freak offs. She said every movement he controlled, and he was
And that's where
basically
the
like the
coercion
director.
comes into place, right? That's where
Pardon me?
that's where the charge of coercion comes into play, right?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. That she had that you people would say, well, why didn't she just walk out the door? She was at a hotel. Why didn't she just walk out the door? It wasn't that simple, because down in the drive up, where the pickup area is of the hotel, is his SUV with a couple of his bodyguards, and she'd had so many beatings. She said the beatings were frequent, and I'm just thinking, Titi, and I know like from the all the red carpet, the all of the images of her that a lot of times we've been using in these stories are at her most glamorous. She's on the red carpet with Diddy dressed to the nines, as he always would do, in these public events. She's looking stunning. She's a stunningly gorgeous woman. She's there in an amazing dress that only she could wear, looking absolutely spectacular. And yet the reality of it was that she was in a living hell. She was in this nightmare, and then she was depressed and then taking drugs, she admitted, because it was the only way that she could get through this situation. So it was really rough.
Also remind folks she's 8.5 months pregnant. She she's there, she's very emotional, she's crying. At times, she's according to the transcript, she's dabbing her eyes, she's taking deep breaths, she's trying
She broke down at one point. She's dabbing her eyes with Kleenex, tearing up. Yeah, it was bad.
she's going reliving this trauma all while she's 8.5 months pregnant. So my question, I guess my next question is, right, so now that they're setting up this you know scene for the jurors to see how she was manipulated, coerced, and all of these things, um during this testimony, what was his mom? What was the demeanor of his family? I know his daughters were in there today. His sons were in there today. Misa, which is one of his other mother's child, was there, and as well as the baby, the 2.5-year-old baby, the mother of that child was in the courtroom today. So were these women there in support of him, in support of Cassie? I'm trying to understand.
No, it's a show of family unity and a show of family support. I think that's what it is. I don't think anybody's happy with the charges. I'm sure they, but it's a show of unity and support for him, because I mean, you've seen over the last year or so, there's very few people that have wanted to have anything to do with Diddy. So I think they really felt there were concerns about his mental, his mental health. They wanted to make sure that he knew he had the support of his family, that it was basically them against the world, no matter what the public opinion was saying. But they'll be back in court tomorrow. I have to get going because they're breaking down this whole situation here.
So
But
my last question to you is, when does the defense get to cross-examine Cassie? That's my last question. And then who else is potentially going to be called to the stand? And will the judge allow the media to see those sex tapes? Is that violating anyone's personal rights? Those are my
well,
last.
there's gonna be a lot of discussion and back and forth about the sex tapes, because Cassie testified today he used the threat of exposing her with those as blackmail to get her to continue to do these freak offs. But in terms of the cross examination, it's going to be interesting to see which lawyer they have on the team who's actually going to talk to Cassie, and that's going to cross examine her. And we're expecting that to happen probably tomorrow afternoon and on Thursday. So the next 2 days are going to be very tough for her, but it's also going to be a lot of information is going to continue to come out, I think. And in terms of other witnesses, I believe the prosecution, he's got people that were key players in Diddy's enterprises that will be getting on the witness stand as witnesses for the prosecution. That's the word that I'm hearing from sources close to the case. So it's going
Former
to be interesting to
managers,
see.
any former managers, former assistants, anybody of of that nature expected to take the stand?
Any and all of the above are possibilities, because you have the bodyguards were mentioned today by name. You have the three personal assistants mentioned by name, and then you have all of the people that were part of the hierarchy of Bad Boy Worldwide and Bad Boy Global. So there's a lot more to see, and I think we should really keep an open mind about everything. He's innocent until proven guilty by the jury, and she deserves our support as a woman that's gone through obviously a very traumatic experience and tried to rebuild her life. But I gotta go because I don't want
I
to.
know Lisa Evans is live on location, guys, and I wish I had more time with her. Lisa, will you tap back in with us to give us more on what's going
TT,
on?
let's tap in. We got this whole StreamYard thing together. Shout out to Rasan. Thanks to the Hot 97 team. TT, thank you very much. We'll keep it going. We'll keep it
Okay.
going.
Thank you so
Okay,
much,
great.
Lisa Evers.
All
Everybody,
right,
it's
thank
Lisa
you.
Evers outside of the Manhattan courtroom where Diddy trial is now underway. It is day 2 in the trial, and we will continue to give you updates here on what's trending and tapping with TT. Thank you, Lisa.